What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're not going to be reacting to memes, but we're going to be reacting to the Nightmare Artist. Just from the thumbnail, it looked really dope. It looked like someone that was that had like very dark thoughts, and he actually drew them out. So, you know, it intrigued me. It really intrigued me. So we're going to see what's up with this, all right? The video is brought to you by In Praise of Shadows. I don't know how to pronounce that. But yeah, I'll put the original video's link in the description. Yeah, I know how to talk, trust.
This
The
is
Nightmare
a photograph
Artist
by Zdzisław Beksinski. Over the course of a 50-year career in art, he would materialize dreams and nightmares onto canvas and celluloid, bring a global eye to Polish art, and would help to define modern heavy metal aesthetic. Born in 1929, his birthplace, Sanok, had one of the largest populations of Jewish people in all of Poland in the lead up to World War II. Roughly 30% of the city, and in 1940, the Zaslav concentration camp was created just on the outskirts, and would remain functional for the next 3 years. In the aftermath of the war, Beksinski would begin to photograph the world that he saw around him during the Soviet occupation of his country.
I'm not gonna lie, bro, those pictures that just flashed by, they look really beautiful, because I don't know if y'all know, but in high school they provided AP photography, and
I'm kind of a professional photographer from Tehran.
nah, but they actually look really dope. Like, it looks like you're just focusing on one image, because, you know, it's so simplified. Instead of having multiple things in your picture, you're just focusing on one thing, which is beautiful.
Country. And it is undeniable that the horrors he experienced through his entire adolescence would later play a massive role in the mindset of his works that he would go on to create. Although not formally trained in art, in 1955 he would study architecture, and develop drafting skills through that would later help him in more than one way. Because as well as training his hand, he would also learn the history and symbolism of architecture that would allow him to make social commentary through his paintings. After finishing his education, he would return home to Sanok, and would design buses for a construction company called Autosan. But during this time, he would continue to experiment more with his photography, incorporating objects that he found at the construction site into the pictures that he took, and decided as a side project to his career that he would become a part-time photographer. And it was here, in 1957, that Beksinski immediately disrupted the art world with his earliest works of photography. The philosophical idea behind photography at the time was that of straight photography or pure photography, and the likes of artists such as Paul Strand, Edward Weston, and Ansel Adams, in which the objective of the photographer was to use the camera to create as sharp an image as possible of the subject, using light to demonstrate every natural texture available. This style was born out of a rejection of pictorialism, which was the reigning style of art photography in the early 1900s, wherein the photographer would try to capture life in a hazy, obscure way, similar to that of the Impressionist painters. Pure photography stood against this staged false idea of life that the pictorialists created within their work, and tried to present objects as they truly were, rather than how a romantic would see them. And so when Beksinski unveiled his photograph, Sadist's Corset, in 1957, there was an immediate backlash to its stylized, posed nature that rejected the traditional nude, facing the figure away from the camera, cropping out the head and legs in a very non-sexual, rigid, standing position. Photography critic Alfred Lagoki publicly criticized the photograph, saying that surrealist photography should not be acknowledged because of its direct interference with the photographed subject on the part of the photographer, that it didn't properly represent the subject as it really was, claiming that Beksinski's work was anti-photography. Beksinski then responded to this publicly
To be honest, he just sounds like a hater.
in Photography magazine with an article titled "The Crisis of Photography and the Perspective to Overcome It," saying that the pervasive style of pure photography didn't allow for artistic expression, and that the medium should grant that to an artist to make an artistic statement if the artist wants to do that. And this philosophy is something that you can see in all of his early photographic works. The subjects are all manipulated, directed, and posed in very specific ways, and were always obscured in some fashion. An out-of-focus chair in the foreground segments the subject of Sadist's corset into pieces. Here mirrors disrupt the natural symmetry of the body, subjects are cropped, photographed as silhouettes, purposefully shown out of focus, and shadows make faces ambiguous and confusing to look at. By the time of the early 1960s, even though he was a renowned photographer, he quit working within the medium entirely and donated all of his photographs to the Historical Museum in Sonic, stating that he had nothing else to say through that art form, and that it limited his imagination. And even though Beksinski today is known entirely for his paintings, you can see here in his photographic works of the 1950s the formation of what would go on to be his trademark existential style. From the beginning of the 1960s to the mid-1980s, Beksinski would enter the era of his career that he would become most known for with the Fantastic series, which melded architecture, spiritualism, eroticism, war, and dream logic into a series of hellscape paintings.
Wow.
Every work of art created by Beksinski was untitled. He didn't like the concept of titling art because of the possibility of creating a misconstrued meaning or perceived interpretation of the work from the artist to the audience. He explained in a 2002 interview that in his opinion, interpretation is imposed by others. Speaking immodestly, paintings are to be admired or contemplated. Admired without asking what it means. If I had something to say, I would write it down or say it. I don't need painting for that. In fact, he didn't really like the concept of interpreting the work at all, and wanted the paintings to just stand on their own as paintings, and would even get upset with critics who tried to come up with a simple answer for what his work meant, saying also at one point that meaning is meaningless to me. I do not care for symbolism, and I paint what I paint without meditating on a story. So I'm not going to try and do that here, and offer up some grand thesis of what his body of work means as a whole. I think he is probably correct in saying that his work is so diverse, and that each individual painting is too complex for me or anyone else to do that well. But despite his wishes, I will go so far as to say that there are common similarities in many works from him that make it difficult for me to not think of his life and the political climate that he grew up in when viewing his paintings from this time. Almost every single one of this set feels like him confronting something very personal that he must have seen or experienced in his youth, as he also explores concepts that obviously captivated and haunted him. And so here I would like to take some time to discuss what I see as the most common themes within his work. His experiences growing up in World War II obviously affected him deeply, and is the most reoccurring topic that I see in his paintings. Here, an ugly red creature conceals itself behind the facade of elegant Greco-Roman architecture. War helmets are a constant reoccurring image, such as here where individuals ride one, dragging a body behind them.
Damn.
Burning buildings, destruction, and chaos reigns in his worlds, and I think the color blue is significant in these scenes. If you aren't aware, the color Prussian blue is named after the prussic acid that is used to produce that color in paint. Prussic acid is also known as hydrogen cyanide. And while the paint itself today is not toxic despite being created with a form of cyanide, other products made from it, such as the pesticide Zyklon B, that would be used by the Germans in gas chambers during World War II, are extremely deadly, and are known under certain circumstances depending on iron and pH levels as well as humidity to leave a blue residue on surfaces that are in frequent contact with the substance, that is chemically identical to that paint. There are two paintings in particular that I believe Beksinski is referencing this in. Here, where a figure reminiscent of common depictions of death, shrouded in Prussian blue, watches as a train of carts covered in religious symbols carries emaciated figures away, who are packed together tightly. As well as here, where possibly the same figure hovers over a child in a cradle, while a man is eaten alive by birds behind him. The words, "In hoc signo vinces," is carved into the wall, a Latin phrase meaning, "In this sign thou shalt conquer." It is also relevant, I think, to note that this phrase was a common popular slogan used by the American Nazi Party. The human body is the subject of almost every Beksinski work, and like most themes within his work, they tend to blend together into one common core of nihilism. His portrayal of thin bodies is very much in my mind tied to the war, and they are also often presented with religious symbols, which themselves are also always shown with destruction tying back into war, in a constant recycling collision of conflicting ideas. He painted hundreds of images in his life, and to me they are each individually small pieces of a larger single Hobbesian statement on human nature. The bodies of Beksinski's paintings are never normal, and are almost always blending into something else, stretching and obscuring the original form. Many bodies form a new creature, faces bloom into nature, Buildings are constructed out of bodies. Notre Dame is made of flesh. Numbers are tattooed or carved into people. A man turns into a building, and a torso into a chair. With these last few possibly being a critique of the victims of the Germans being turned into household objects, such as soap or lampshades. Each person depicted is a parody of life, with the only common element being that they are always thinner than they should be. A corpse plays the violin, a ruined dancer poses, the faces shift this way and that way, until the argument could be made that they are no longer faces at all. They are usually cropped or segmented into pieces, positioned in almost natural ways, and yet somehow entirely unnatural at the same time. And the positioning of the bodies also ties into the idea of crowds, surrounding larger-than-life government officials and religious figures as well, as the idea of crowd mentality is critiqued heavily in his work, where those in large groups stare vacantly forward or gnash their teeth in joyous anger. Here, a large group, probably representing death, wearing helmets block the way forward on a path, and here, a great head devours the masses. And on the religious side, a massive being hovers over the earth, with the symbol of religion in its front pocket. A cardinal appears with a diseased, rotting face. Graves litter the yard of Notre Dame, and many, many crosses rise up out of the destruction of war. But there are just as many paintings that don't have as overt of a possible meaning behind them, which is why I say that it's difficult to lump all of his output into one definite thesis, just in the same way that it would be difficult to place the entirety of a man's life into one neat sentence. Life is messy, and just because he witnessed the horrors of human rights violations as a youth, doesn't mean that makes up everything about him as a person. And there are many paintings like these that hum with mystery to me, and that is one of the things that I appreciate most about him, is that you can think you almost have him pinned down as an artist, and then you'll discover, for instance, that he created a set of sadistic erotic drawings that surprises you because they are totally unlike anything else that he ever worked on. The 1990s are personally my least favorite era of Beksinski's art, but I don't blame him for this. As with many creative people at the time, he became enamored with the new possibilities that digital art offered, and for a while he returned to photography, using new programs such as Photoshop to manipulate his photographs, as well as those taken by others, to create new images out of them. He said in this time that, "There's a certain refreshment of mind in this work, the view from a totally different perspective than at painting. Playing with these programs, I can create artificial reality at any angle and figuratively photograph it, which would be the final result of creation." But the artificial reality of these works that he created in this time, to me, are not on the same level as what would have come before, in my opinion. They definitely come from the same mind and the same perspective, but these feel less raw to me, less visceral or emotional. I enjoy him revisiting imagery from earlier in his career that he developed during the Fantastic period, such as doing this digital work of Notre Dame. But I do feel like a lot of fine artists, as well as comic artists, were held back in this era by trying to embrace new technologies before they were perfected. And I think that Beksinski realized this as well eventually, as he became frustrated with digital art and abandoned it by the 2000s and would return to painting. But unfortunately, this would not last for long, as on the 21st of February 2005, he entered an argument with a man named Robert, the son of his housekeeper, who wanted to borrow the equivalent of about $100. Beksinski refused, the argument became heated, and the two entered into an altercation, and Robert stabbed Beksinski 17 times, killing him, robbing him not only of his life, but the world also of more Beksinski paintings. That year, Burning Man would display a red cross in the shape of a T in his honor, and soon after, the city of Sanok would open a museum dedicated to his work in a local castle that is still open to this day. Beksinski is undeniably the symbol of the birth of modern Polish art, but I also believe that he stands as a symbol of a reaction to a very specific chaotic time in world history, from a perspective that lived through it and saw it unfold as it all horribly happened. Through war, through travesty, through occupation and totalitarianism, he took these things in and held on to them, before I think they exploded into a pure, emotional, visceral reaction at the horrors of life. And the artistic vantage point that provides emotional information about this time is invaluable.
Damn. I don't even know what to think about that, bro. That was crazy. I mean, I know I think I've seen like one of his drawings before, like the Notre Dame or Notre Dame, whatever it's called, in the skeletons. I've seen one of those before, and they look pretty dope. But dang, he has a lot of creative as drawings. I like his paintings more. I think yeah, his paintings were really nice compared to his CGI, his Photoshop ones, bro. The Photoshop ones were like the beginning era of Photoshop, so that understands why he like went overboard with the contrast and all that. But damn, that's actually a really dope as drawing and a really cool artist. As a fellow art major in high school, I could say his art is very crazy and it's very intense and very emotional, which is pretty nice. You know, it's sometimes nice to see those type of real, like, you know, they have like real meaning than other than just like being shown the Mona Lisa like 3,000 times and saying that this is the most famous painting in the world. So yeah, that's it do it for this video, guys. I hope you guys like it, and I might do more art reviews in the future because I have a high knowledgeable stuff in art. Alright, I'll see you guys. Love you guys. See you in the next video.